It appears now that law enforcement believe Kylie left the party at the campground and went somewhere else. Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So if you go to a recent tweet, I think it was tweeted a couple of hours ago really, maybe about 7 hours ago, Placer Sheriff tweeted the following, quote, "If you're keeping up with our posts and presses, you'd know that Kylie was loaned the black hoodie on the 5th of August. Today, we learned that there was video of Kylie at the party wearing the white sweatshirt." Now, when they say today, they're basically saying, around about 9 or 10 days into the search for her, they've only learned that she was wearing the white sweatshirt. Then they go on to say, hoping this can lead to more info about where Kylie may have gone after the party. So that is clearly where their thoughts are. Now, on the one hand, that would make some sense, more sense perhaps, of Captain Sam Brown's cryptic comment. Remember when he said, just because it was pinged there doesn't mean that's where the phone stopped pinging, right? I thought that was a weirdly obscure statement to make, because I think you would imagine that that is where it stopped pinging, wouldn't you? Now, my sense is that the phone stopped pinging at the campground, and so it makes sense to look for Kylie and her vehicle there. But since neither Kylie nor her vehicle have been found, I suppose it does make sense to at least think about looking elsewhere. So a few days ago, the YouTuber All-American Dream Chaser interviewed Sammy, Kylie's friend. The interview with her starts at 3:22 in the clip. I'll provide a link to that in the description so you can listen to it yourself firsthand if you haven't already. There's also a transcript to the interview from the Substack site, Never a Truer Word, and I'll put a link to that as well. It's a link to the transcript of Sammy's statement to Tony Dodge. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So this is a very useful thing to look at. It's basically a statement that Sammy's made. I do wonder whether she's made a statement to the authorities. I would imagine that she has, but in any event, this is quite a lengthy statement. And I'm going to look at it in a way, I think, different to other people. I'm not really here to blame her, to accuse her of murdering her friend, which I think is absurd. There are obviously aspects that are problematic, but I certainly am not taking the view that I think a lot of other people are, which is something really nefarious, right? There could be a lot of reasons for someone not being completely honest. And you often do have that with young people, but that's a totally different scenario to what we typically deal with in true crime, where someone's not completely honest. This is a little bit different. So I hope you're going to bear that in mind. So going to the transcript, Tony Dodge says, "So at the night of the party, the last time you saw her, that's Kylie, can you give us a rundown of the party real quick? I understand it was a large gathering." So Sammy responds at length. She says, "Yeah, so it was supposed to be a senior farewell party where all the seniors and everybody from around our area like Tahoe and Truckee and Incline and Kings Beach were supposed to be there. They were invited there because it was supposed to be like saying goodbye to your favorite teenagers before everybody starts going off to college. Because soon enough, your people are going to start leaving and moving out. And so Kylie's a senior, or she graduated early. So she's considered a senior, and I was a senior. So every senior was initially invited to the party. Now, at this point, I think although it's obvious, I think it's also important just to highlight the fact that there's something different about Kylie. Kylie is at a party, and there's something unusual about her being there. And the unusual thing is she's younger than pretty much everybody else. And so that already makes it a little bit problematic. The other thing is her youth doesn't necessarily make up for her, or put it this way, her intelligence doesn't necessarily make up for her youth when it comes to substances. That is something you really develop with experience and age, not with intelligence. Does that make sense? Anyway, so she goes on to say she's considered a senior, and I was a senior, so every senior was initially invited to the party. And as well, all grades were invited just so that they could say goodbye. Now, I don't know whether that's normal. I don't know if it's normal that all grades are invited, but there you go. She goes on to say, so I had talked with Kylie and I'd known she was going beforehand. We hadn't planned on going together, and we ended up not going together. She came with her best friend Mags Larson, Magdalene. Sorry, that's her first name. And so she came with her, drove in with her, and then Mags ended up leaving about 10 minutes into the party with her boyfriend Ross. Now, it would be really interesting to find out, why did Mags leave so early? Was it because there were so many people there? Were there a lot of people there right from the get-go? Were there other things going on? Did Kylie and Mags have some kind of disagreement? What is all that about? Or was Mags never going to be there to begin with? Did she have other plans? Or did her boyfriend have other plans? Now, you must also bear in mind that you've got some people who are in relationships and they want to go somewhere else for their special sort of celebration, right? You kind of almost get the sense that single people are going to this party. And one of them is Kylie. So Sammy goes on to say, Mag's boyfriend and then sort of interrupts herself and says, told Kylie goodbye and everything, and they were never planning on like leaving together or staying together at the party. They just went to party together because they were hanging out early in the day. That also makes you wonder, would Mags not have asked Kylie later on in the evening, how are things going? Wouldn't there have been interactions either way between them, since they were best friends? Anyway, Sammy goes on to say, and then I saw her the second she got there. And from that moment on, we were pretty much seen together all around the party. We would break off for mere moments from each other to go and to other people to go and do things, but we would always come back to each other. We were just going around the party. We were drinking the same drinks, being teenagers, throwing glow sticks into the party. So here you kind of have Sammy emphasizing the fact that they were very close, they were very tight, they were spending a lot of time together. And this just seems to be Sammy saying that, there was nothing sort of suspicious going on, that it's unlikely that a substance has got anything to do with this. And also that I think in a way she's clearing her own name, saying, I had her back, I looked out for her. Of course, there's a bit of a contradiction to that in what happens in the end, where she leaves Kylie. In any event, during the party itself, she says that they were together almost like a team. Then she says, and it started to grow really big. And so that seems to suggest that Mags wasn't put off by the size of the party. Maybe she just had other plans. Then she says, I would say around 10 to 10:30, it just blew up, like it started to get to the point where I was getting overwhelmed. And she mentions this word overwhelming a couple of times, but one's also got to say, if she was so overwhelmed, why did she want to stay longer? She says, I'm a very social person. I've been to a lot of these parties. I've never been overwhelmed. I've actually been underwhelmed. But this party, it was very large. Like it was bigger than any party we've had in Truckee all year and for a lot of years past. Now, you've kind of got to wonder, is that really a bad thing? Isn't this supposed to be a big party, and the bigger the better, right? Isn't it a case of this? It was a huge party and it was so great, So she goes on to say, there were people from what we think Sacramento, San Francisco. I remember talking to somebody who is from San Francisco, Reno, Folsom areas that were just way out of reach from it. And it was really overwhelming and weird to see. But I didn't really think much of it. So you can imagine if there were a lot of people coming from far afield, they wouldn't be returning home that same night. Does that make sense? They would either be camping in that camp area, or they would be staying somewhere in a prearranged setup, or they would be kind of at the drop of a hat going where someone else had invited them to, perhaps a local. She also talks about them having vacation homes up there. That's something else authorities could check into. Where were these vacation homes, and go and have a look at those. And so she goes on to say they're just coming to party because why not, right? She goes on to say, so then Kylie and I were going around taking shots and just drinking. I don't know if that was the case. I don't know if they were only drinking, but maybe they were. She says we were trading drinks with each other. We were sharing drinks with each other. We would go back to her car to get some alcohol sometimes, and then we went to her car to charge her phone. So all of this sounds quite innocent, going to the car to get alcohol, going to the car to charge her phone. Is there any other mention of going to the car, with different circumstances? And then she says, and we were talking about just random stuff, and then it's kind of hard to remember. Now that is what stands out to me. Then it's kind of hard to remember. Why was that? Why specifically was it hard to remember? Now I'm not saying she can't remember because she's being deceitful, but perhaps there was a substance involved that affected her memory, and one of those is midazolam. It does affect the ability to make new memories while it's activated. She goes on to say, we were talking about her texting her mom and her charging her phone and stuff, and just about the party in general. And then we had a few other friends in the car. That's the other part that stands out. First of all, her saying it's kind of hard to remember. Then we had a few other friends in the car, and then we all decided to go back to the party. Well, that is something you certainly want to sort of know a bit more about in more detail. Who were these friends? Were some of them boys? Were some other activities going on at the car besides charging and drinking? She goes on to say, and we were there, we were around in there for a bit. I'd asked her for a ride home, and we were in the car because my ride was leaving, and I wanted to stay at the party longer. I've also emphasized that. Why would you want to stay at the party longer if it was so overwhelming? Well, it had to be pretty good, right? She goes on to say, and so then we ended up splitting up in the party because I had to find another ride. When we got back into the party after leaving the car so that we could, I'm sorry. The host then refers to someone wanting to ask a question and said, did Kylie let you know who the quote unquote friend was that was driving her home? She then responds, Sammy says, yes, so this is a common misconception. She was not being driven home and she was not driving. So, okay, at the end of the party when she called, when I saw her, she was supposed to give me a ride home because I'd asked her to give me a ride home because I wanted to stay later. So that's the second time she's saying that. Now, I don't really know whether what she means is, I didn't want to leave early. This is before even arriving at the party. I didn't want to leave at, say, 11. Or if it means once at the party and seeing that the party is so amazing, she then wanted to stay later, if that makes sense. In other words, you could say before you go to a party, before you even know what the party is about, you might say, I want to stay later. That's totally different to being at the party and deciding to stay later. Does that make sense? Anyway, Sammy goes on to say, I then realized later in the party that I believe she was drunk, and I knew she was drunk, and so I did not want her to be driving me home. She goes on to say, because, I know about drunk drivers and all that, and so, I figured she would be staying there or she would find a ride home because she's a smart girl. She's smart enough to know. She's smart. And I think that's a little bit of hand-wringing to say she would look after herself, she would sort herself out. That's very, very different to what she says about when she says earlier, we were seen together all the time. We would keep coming back to one another and we were drinking the same drinks. All of that solidarity ends when Sammy seems to be aware that Kylie was drunk. Was there some other reason that they ended up splitting up at this point? So she goes on to say, and so then I found her as I was leaving the party. I was making sure to find her to tell her that I had another ride home and that I loved her and wanted to say bye and for her to have fun at the party. And then when I left the party, we were pretty much on 89 with my ride. And I don't know if you've noticed, she doesn't mention anyone's name here. Just absolutely no one's name except Mag's. Then she says, and she called me, meaning Kylie, as I was in the car in the passenger seat, and she was like, hey, where are you? Do you still need a ride home? And I was like, no, I'm okay. Like, I'm in the car right now. I'm driving. And then she kind of cuts herself off. And I think some people have made a big deal, was Sammy driving? Was that just a slip of the tongue? But even if she was driving, I don't know if that really makes her a murderer. Maybe she wanted to leave at a certain time, and maybe Kylie didn't want to leave at a certain time. It would have actually made sense for Sammy to drive Kylie home. And so one wonders, what was the real reason? Did Kylie absolutely not want to leave? Had Kylie met a boy there? Was Kylie with a certain group of friends there? Or had Sammy met a group of friends and she was driving back with them? Anyway, she said, but Kylie did not have a set ride home. And I was under the impression that she would either sleep there or find another ride home. And one kind of also wants to know, was that just an assumption, or was that impression based on something? Did Kylie sort of suggest that? How did that impression come about? It may just be that Kylie sort of felt like, I really don't want this party to end. I really don't want to go home. And so Sammy was just under the impression, well, she's not going to go home, and she's going to, or certainly not then, and she was going to make some other plan. And so Sammy goes on to say, it was not known that anybody was going to give her a ride home. She was not when she called me. She was not in a car. I could hear the party and many people talking in the background. So that is giving us a very clear idea from Sammy where Kylie was when she called. She wasn't in a car. The party was still going on, and there were people around. And so one does wonder, when that phone call ended, what happened? Did somebody approach her? Did somebody approach her who'd been approaching her before? Was some new arrangement made? Did some group leave? And that is why the group that was there need to come forward and just talk about what arrangements were sort of made. Even if it's to exclude certain groups, to say this group went there and Kylie wasn't with us. That group went to X location and Kylie wasn't with us. This other group went to Y location and Kylie wasn't with us, right? And that's one way you're going to find out where she may have gone. So I think you can't help taking the same approach as law enforcement. Why is there such a big mystery if there were so many people around her? I mean, there's no shortage of witnesses, and yet we don't know what happened after this point. If Sammy ended up getting a ride or giving a ride to someone else, didn't the same thing happen with Kylie? Didn't Kylie give someone else a ride? And isn't that where Kylie and the vehicle went? So I'm not going to take it further than that. I just think it's maybe after 10 days, having not found Kylie, perhaps some of the people at the party are slowly coming forward. Perhaps their consciences are starting to prick them. Let's hope so. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.